Welcome to Perimenopausal Athletes and Beyond. And we are talking about all things sport, all things health, all things how to stay active in life and be just the best absolute that you can be at all times, pretty much. And today we are joined by Jacqueline Semple. And that's hello, Jacqueline, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me and for the opportunity.
Oh, we are going to have fun because when I reached out to you, it was like, wow, this is interesting. I don't have an education in understanding how you in your profession of acupuncture, I'm going to tell you a little bit more, everybody, about who Jacqueline is, and then why it's important for sport and how do we use it within sport and how do we use it to within recovery. And she's going to tell us that's what we're going to get into today. So it's super, super exciting. So just to give you a little bit more background, Jacqueline has a diploma of acupuncture at the Pacific Rim College, and she is a registered acupuncturist with the College of Traditional Chinese Medicine Practitioners and acupuncturist of British Columbia. She holds a degree in sport, health, and physical education, where she played varsity volleyball for 4 years. So an athlete herself, she's a certified yoga instructor. She loves anatomy, biomechanics, and just pretty much everything about the human body, and just loves to dig in. So we get to geek out together. I love it. And yeah, so what we are talking about, as I mentioned, is acupuncture and sport. Yeah. And this is a modality that we don't often go to. So I have a group called Athletes Thriving in Perimenopause and Beyond on Facebook. And I asked specifically, Jacqueline, tell me of the modalities that you use for recovery or to deal with inflammation or whatever that you're dealing with. And sport people don't often think acupuncture. We think acupuncture for, like, I used it for fertility, and we think about it for other methods, but both for women in perimenopause, it might be interesting. And then as athletes is interesting. So that's where I want to dig in with you, and I'm excited about it. So Where do we begin? I'm going to let you tell me, where do we begin when we think about this, and why is acupuncture a thing for sport?
Okay. So first of all, for Chinese medicine theory, I mean, I was in school for almost four years for it after my undergrad, and I'm going to be learning more about this theory and this tradition until the end of my time. So my understanding, I'm still learning. So I think the true art of being a good Chinese medicine practitioner is communicating it in a way that is understandable to anyone. So because the terminology can get a little confusing for those of you who have tried acupuncture, but if we were to treat perimenopause and menopause and then take an athletic approach, you can technically treat both together, but you would take a separate route, or I would at least. So whenever we're doing let's say integrative myofascial acupuncture, like a sport medicine acupuncture approach, there is more of that, what you would expect for a manual therapy. So there would be, what I use in my practice is manual muscle testing, orthopedic assessments, then diagnosing what's involved in the injury or the pain or the dysfunction of whatever tissue it is. Mm-hmm. Then there is the treatment itself, and then exercise prescription at the end. So very, very almost like Western approach. It's very anatomy informed, in conjunction with TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture points that will help support the whole person, not just the musculoskeletal issues, what we call exterior patterns or syndromes. What I love about taking this TCM approach to treating pain and injury is we treat it, whether it's acute, chronic, intermittent, or like a recurring injury. And quite often, if it's a recurring injury that doesn't go away, that doesn't fully heal, sometimes in Chinese medicine, there's what we call an underlying internal organ pathology. So for instance, the spleen and stomach, our digestion is mainly responsible for controlling the strength and function of the muscles in Chinese medicine. So If it's a muscle issue, we might ask different signs and symptoms about the digestive system. Are you fully assimilating and absorbing your food so that your muscles can be fully nourished? As women, we are more yin and we're much more blood related, whereas men are much more yang and qi related, which is why we have a lot more blood related pathologies or diseases. So either that's blood deficiency, blood stasis, which is like painful periods, stuff like that. But anyways, so spleen and stomach, muscles. The kidney is all about bones and marrow. So any type of bone or like joint disorder. So let's say osteoarthritis, any issue there, we would also be treating the bones, especially as we age in Chinese medicine, because I'll get into that after actually, the
Right.
Chinese side. And then finally, the liver and gallbladder are all about the ligaments and the tendons. So if there's an issue in pathology there that can't go away, we're looking to support that, as well as doing this sort of manual therapy approach. So, and the big thing I really like about this too, especially when treating athletes with Chinese medicine, is we always, always, always take into account how is this person's emotional state, especially if you're a high performance athlete. There's usually a process of like, first of all, grief, or frustration or irritation, loss. If you can't go back to the sport that you did because the injury was so severe, or if you're frustrated or there's a lot of pressure on you because maybe that was your main financial income, we're going to be treating that as well. And we call that the Shen. The Shen is like your spirit. It is your emotional health. It's your cognitive health. It's, you know, your ability to process things really well. Like, are you all there? And we look for that too when we're having an appointment with a patient. So it's so holistic and I love that. And I think that's so important.
Okay, we're gonna have to dig into some of the things that you just said, but one thing that is in my head that I just need to ask is, how did you come into being an acupuncturist and knowing, like, as an athlete, what led you
Oh,
personally to
mhm.
get there and to understand that this was something that was really important?
Mhm. Um, well, I have like, it's a bit of a story, but I'll tell you because it's a good one. When I was 15, I'm from Northern Alberta. And when I was 15, it was a really warm day in March. And a group of friends and I went to the tube hill. We were tubing with like sweaters and snow pants. And for that reason, because the snow was melting, it was really slippery.
Yeah.
And we were being just bad teenagers and not listening to the ski instructors of like, hey, it's slippery, don't run on the ice. And I went to surf down this patch of ice that's probably about 2 meters long at like maybe like a 45-degree angle. And my feet slipped out from under me and I was pulling a tube behind me and I slipped and fell on my back.
Oh.
And my humerus had a complete spiral fracture. So a 6-inch spiral fracture, it broke in 2 pieces instantly. When I got up, I thought I dislocated my elbow because it was just completely flopping around. It was really gross, like gag. And I had to go to the hospital. I got emergency orthopedic reconstructive surgery. I still have a 6-inch steel plate and 6 screws in there to this day. And I was originally introduced to acupuncture during the rehab process. So I got out of the cast and I had like a 90-degree, like full arm cast for about a month. And when I got out, my muscles were so atrophied that my brachial tendon, this tendon here, was actually like sticking out. Like when I tried to straighten it, it was so short, it was locked at a 90-degree. So like trying typical rehabilitative stuff, like I was getting nowhere. I was trying it for like 2 or 3 weeks. I was pretty devastated. I wanted to get back to sports. My arm would not straightened. And at the clinic where I was, there was an Asian practitioner, a male, and I couldn't tell you if he was Korean, Japanese, Chinese, but he practiced acupuncture and he asked my therapist, hey, is it cool if I just come and try some needling on her? Because I think he was probably just watching from afar being like, oh my God, like,
Yes.
yeah, like,
Help this woman.
and I was terrified. I didn't want to do it. I was afraid of needles, but I was also desperate and I wanted to get back to playing sports. So I let him do it. And I couldn't even remember the points to this day. I remember Hagu, large intestine 4, which is this point. It's kind of, I remember that one. That's all I really remember. But after the first treatment, my arm straightened about 45 degrees. Unbelievable. And that was just after having a few needles in. It wasn't even a lot. I don't remember. And then after the second treatment, my arm was completely straight. And then I could start my rehabs. Like I could start doing physio. I could start doing the strength and conditioning. And yeah, so I forgot about that because I was 15. Boom, gone out of my memory. Like cool, whatever. And then my undergrad sort of introduced me at Vancouver Island University to this class called spirituality that we had to take to graduate. And like, I was kind of like rolling my eyes when I had to take it, but it was so cool because this instructor really made it his own. And it was the first time I tried meditation. It was when I first tried yoga. We got, a naturopathic doctor came in and spoke with us, and we were sort of introduced into all these different ways of medicine, even like herbal medicine to Vancouver Island, that everything we have around here that you can actually use as medicine. And it really sort of opened, like, I remember meditating for the first time and being like, whoa, self-awareness. Like, I wish I had that when I was playing volleyball. Oh my gosh, my performance would have been so different.
Yeah. Mhm.
Instead of just kind of riding the roller coaster of the emotions, like having some control over them, that would have been nice. But that sort of is where I chose to go into preventative medicine, something that was holistic as opposed to just going into like physio or chiro or RMT. And acupuncture seemed to sort of marry those both worlds.
The spiritual and yeah. Thank you for your story. That's really cool. It is interesting how we can go through and we have these profound, instances when we were young and how much they make a difference now.
Mhm.
And what I love as well in your story is just how much we can extrapolate from it, even though you were young, and we are talking, to perimenopausal women and beyond.
Mhm.
We can still learn. We still have this ability to take on new methods and to really take this practice that of acupuncture or other ones as well, but to take it on and to have a belief, even though you're not really sure where it's going to go. So can you tell us, because not everybody understands acupuncture and how it works. Can you just give us like 101 Cole's notes on why, like, what is it that is transforming within the body, within the Chinese, like within Chinese medicine, and why it is that it can help in sport specifically? Like, is it flow, or like, how is it that chi kind of starts going or something?
Yeah.
In my very rudimentary
No, it's a great question, and it's a tough one to answer too. But in regards to like performance or basically we want to optimize function and mobility and strength, flexibility, all those things. And acupuncture, it goes into the tissue for one. So you have this sort of direct contact into the tissue. Depending on the approach you take with acupuncture too, you can actually purposefully create muscle fasciculations. So that's where you actually insert the needle into the belly of the muscle where most of the motor nerves innervate the muscle.
Yeah.
And because there's more of an electrical potential in the belly of the muscle with the motor nerves, by inserting a metal object, i.e. the needle, you actually cause that tissue, that muscle to contract and relax.
Right.
So often with certain movement patterns, especially with athletes who are doing the same movement over and over again, you're going to have muscle imbalances just based on those repetitive movements. So if for whatever reason a certain muscle is locked long, by creating that muscle fasciculation, you're reminding the muscle brain connection and spinal cord connection that it has more potential to either elongate or it has more potential to contract, depending if the muscle is locked long and weak. So usually if you don't use a muscle a lot, it might be sort of like overextended and overstretched and weak, like kind of common in the upper thoracic area. And opposite of that, a muscle can be like hypertonic, so constantly contracted and locked short. So you're basically reminding it that it has more range of motion and more potential. And then we can also help with proprioception in regards to sport, which is really helpful. So usually after an injury, it's never usually quite the same, like your proprioception from that tissue. So if you roll your ankle over and over again, or roll it once, you tend to roll it again because you don't have that sensation from your foot to stabilize. That's autonomic. We don't think about that.
Right.
And if you don't fully heal, you're prone to having that again. So what acupuncture is great at is sort of needling the affected tissue, the injured area, but then you can also needle the dorsal nerve roots that exit the spine that are sort of lining up with either the dermatome or where they branch out to connect to that tissue. And then you're therefore creating that proprioception. So let's say sciatic nerve pain, glute pain. So needling the glute med, the glute min, you can even go down into the hamstrings, the calf, the foot, depending where the pain goes, or even piriformis syndrome, deep gluteal syndrome. So you needle those associated muscles, but then also what we call the huato jiaji points, which are just lateral to the spinal cord that are not the spinal cord, sorry, lateral to the transverse process. So it's in a very, very safe place. We're not needling the spinal cord.
Yeah.
But you're stimulating where those nerves exit the spine, and then you're stimulating the muscles that are involved in the area. So you're reestablishing that communication and the proprioception. And I think that's why acupuncture is so great for neuropathy and like radiculopathy. So nerve pain, paresthesia, numbness, tingling. It's so helpful for that. And I've even had help with that with my metal implant. I used to get chronic bouts of really, really bad nerve pain. But since I started acupuncture, like school, my journey, it's never returned. And a pain doctor in Oak Bay at a walk-in clinic actually suggested I get acupuncture when I was suffering with it in 2016. And I thought that was so cool that he was like, oh, acupuncture is amazing for nerve pain. Go get some acupuncture.
Yeah.
I love Victoria. Yeah.
Well, and this is just such an interesting, I'm so glad that we're having this conversation, because we often look to ways of being in action, and acupuncture feels so passive, but yet it is very active in its own way while you're kind of lying down and not having to, it's a different action and a really different way to be in muscular work. So,
yeah. And like what I'm describing is a much more sort of like sport medicine, or like not physical therapy, but more of a therapeutic rehab approach to acupuncture, where there is much more of this nourishing Chinese medicine perspective approach that you can take as well. Mm-hmm. And can I just briefly talk about perimenopause and menopause?
That lovely segue. I was going to say, okay, now let's get into that.
Yeah, because I think I talked about how it can work for pain and injury and optimal like movement optimization and stuff like that. But if I were to be treating a perimenopausal athlete, so as I mentioned earlier, women are more yin, we're much more blood related. Yin is all about like, if you think about a car, the yin is like the coolant and the oil that keeps everything lubricated and cool, where gas is like the chi, it's the energy, it's what keeps you moving. So being more yin dominant, this is why we dry out as we age in like kind of all physiological aspects as us when we go through those transitions in life. So as you're going through perimenopause and menopause, my goal as an acupuncturist is to nourish yin and to nourish the kidneys. Because as I touched on before, kidneys in Chinese medicine actually govern our growth and development, our reproductive system. It's something called kidney essence, is this substance that we inherit from our parents, which is kind of loosely translated to like our DNA, our genetics, our congenital sort of vulnerabilities that we get from our parents. So that's incorporated in that too. And we're only given so much when we're born, and we have it, and it's slowly diminishing as we progress and as we age, which is why, again, related to the kidney, as we age, so I mentioned the kidneys manifest in the bones, but they also manifest in the health of the hair, the teeth, the bones, and the marrow, and also hearing, the ears. They have a big influence there. So if you think about aging, those are all the things that kind of age, right?
Right.
Our hair gets a little whiter. It might get a little more dry. We might have issues with the teeth and hearing, and same with the health of our bones. And usually if people have they just seem to look so young, like that's great kidney essence. They inherited some good like juice from their parents, and also take care of themselves. So when we talk about perimenopause and menopause in Chinese medicine, again, we're sort of transitioning into something that's called yang sheng. And this isn't just Chinese medicine, it's quite common in like Taoist and Buddhist traditions, but it's all about nourishing life. And you know what's amazing is I just did this online course on menopause right before we had been in contact to do this. So the timing was crazy.
Yeah.
And there was these 4 pillars of the Yang Sheng principles. And it's the cultivation of the mind. So managing our emotions, learning to respond versus react, regulation of the diet, which, limiting alcohol, finishing food before you're stuffed, eating enough, making sure you're nourished, The third is cultivation of the body. So that's our physical exercise, rest, but also like meditation, stuff like that. And then lastly, it's sleep. And those four things are the exact same pillars that you had on your Instagram page of like getting the full treatment. It was exactly the same. So these theories of nourishing ourselves isn't a new concept, but also I find, and maybe I'm biased, but this is my experience as an athlete and a female athlete. I'm a washed up athlete, but when it was, we're very yang dominant and we don't often just embrace our yin, that we are these naturally yin bodies. And as we get older, we are forced to nourish that yin a little bit more. Otherwise we can't perform. If we're dried up and we don't have any resources left in the kidneys to push forward and perform, and kidneys are all about your ability to do like really hard things for long periods of time. So if you think of a workaholic who just go, kind of like fight or flight all the time, they're burning at like all fuses,
Right.
but after a while, their kidneys are going to be like, they're going to need to rest. And then there's the opposite of that as well. So bit of a tangent there. See, this is why
it's so absolutely perfect, because I love it. I love it that in Chinese medicine, we're talking like thousands and thousands of years. And at the essence of it is things that are becoming so absolutely important to the conversation for athletes now, and athletes as female athletes specifically. And it comes into our discussions of perimenopause and beyond, and how to embrace that. And what I want to talk to you now about is, what do we need to know? Okay. Actually, I'm going to ask you this. Like, this is what my experience of acupuncture is. It's like meditation for me. So I will go onto the table of my acupuncturist and I will literally have the hardest sleep. Like, I will pass out and like I'm twitching and I have no idea what's going on. What is that? Like, what is happening there? And why is that? And I'm like, okay, talk about the need to self-care. And what is like, is that, how does that kind of feed into, because that's I think a common experience, or what does one experience when they go to acupuncture? Am I just like totally
well, it's much different than like an IMS treatment, which you might get from another manual therapist. So it's with TCM acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine, or Korean or Japanese style acupuncture, it's meant to be gentle and a less is more approach. And I found that was the biggest shift in my mindset, being an athlete with my undergrad and like background in sport, and then shifting into this sort of world. Like, I used to be like, if it's not a deep tissue massage, it's not doing anything. Like, if I'm not in pain. And that was like my mindset. And then I started getting these more gentle treatments, and like, you know, it's very common for volleyball players to have like one QL that's really short, some SI stuff, like a very protracted internally rotated shoulder that we hit with. And our bodies kind of have these holding patterns. And it was the gentle treatments where it felt like less is more, much more restorative, that I was getting more of these breakthroughs in the changes of how my body was holding itself, which is something that's called tensegrity. It's kind of like how the soft tissues hold themselves around the bony skeletal structure.
right.
But what's happening, what science has proven, when the needles are actually in, if they're in for like 20 minutes, you start stimulating a parasympathetic response, and that is your rest and digest. So neurotransmitters in the brain like serotonin, dopamine, endorphins, which are natural painkillers, these all start getting triggered to release, which are just going to make you relax, which is often why when you go home that night, you have the best sleep. So yeah, you can, and then you can kind of guide where the practice is, whether it's a prehab sort of treatment, if you're helping someone prepare for a big event and you want to make sure their ligaments are not going to, like ultra marathon runners, let's make sure everything's feeling good. And then post for the recovery. Same thing with surgeries. You can prepare for surgery, make sure the internal organs are functioning, that you're having a good sleep, digestion is like good to go, so that when you're repairing that damaged tissue, it's just functioning better. I thought it was interesting too to note, I don't know if you've chatted about this, but in this, I really want to talk about this because I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
In this course I took by Peter Deadman, he's kind of a legendary guy in the Chinese medicine world. But there's these social and cultural and genetic factors of how we experience menopause, and it kind of changes in where you are in the world. So there's these cultural factors. Yeah. So It was like 85% of North Americans experience hot flashes, 75% of women in the UK do, and then only 5 to 10% of women in Asia experience hot
Okay.
flashes. Yeah. And uh, it's the cultural factors, it's influenced by cultural views on aging. And I find in North America, menopause is such a bad thing, or I don't want to get older. And some people, don't get me wrong, they welcome it. They say it was a beautiful transition. They had
Yeah.
no signs and symptoms, and they just felt so good after. And that's the goal. But so many things affect how women experience menopause. There's socioeconomic factors like,
Mhm.
are you taking care of your sick parents? Do you have adult kids at home? What's your relationship like with your partner? How is your financial situation? Like, there's all these things that can either set you up or make it really challenging. And then the social factors too is like past experiences of mood disorders, a negative attitude towards menopause and aging, concurrent life events, personality and your coping styles, low self-esteem, and anyways, yeah, lack of that support. So if there's all these other things in place, we can kind of anticipate what it's going to be like. What was it like for your mom? Do you have any other chronic illnesses? Anyways, all these things that can either, create pathological symptoms where you go seek medical help for things that are driving you crazy,
Mhm.
or maybe you have a great smooth transition and it's wonderful. Like in some countries, women actually get much more liberated and freedom once everyone knows that they are no longer childbearing, and they actually look forward to menopause because they can dress how they like. They're allowed to be on the streets. Like that's
Mhm.
literally what it means in some cultures. So
Mhm.
I find it so different how in some places it's celebrated and it's this beautiful, wonderful thing. And I feel like it's kind of different here. And I don't think across the board. And,
Yeah.
I just thought it was interesting.
Well, I think that part of it is starting to have these type of conversations and ensuring that people know what it is and what is perimenopause and what is
Mhm.
menopause, being one
Mhm.
day and then postmenopause and how do we prepare for it. And I know that that's part of
Yes.
all the things that we're doing. And I love it that this is Chinese medicine of the holistic approach and what you bring to it. I want to just ask you one more question, just so people know when to, like, because you touched on it a little bit earlier, and that was you can go to an acupuncture if you have a sport medicine, like a sport injury or something, or when do you go to an acupuncture? When do I,
Ah,
is it when I have injury? Is it when I'm,
yeah.
like you said, preparing for an event? Is it
Mhm.
something you just keep on going? Like,
Yeah, totally.
yeah.
No, that's an amazing question. So it's designed to be a preventative medicine. Like back in the day, in early ancient China, you didn't pay your Chinese medicine doctor until what was it? You don't pay them until you get sick or something like that. Like they're supposed to keep you healthy and you pay them. And then once you get sick, it's like, hey, why am I sick? I see you all the time. Like I'm supposed to be in tip top shape.
They pay you.
Exactly. So now medicine is
Right.
based on an interventionalist
Yeah.
approach. Like we usually don't go until something's wrong. But in saying that, it can be used as an interventionalist approach. And it's actually unbelievable for acute issues.
Okay.
Very fresh. If it's something more chronic or intermittent, you're going to have to commit to a longer treatment plan. Acute is a shorter treatment plan. If you're looking to help something like this, again, this very normal, beautiful passage of life, which is perimenopause and menopause, I would start going monthly leading up to that, or quarterly. But especially if you if you want to anticipate sort of regulating the intensity and severity of any signs and symptoms that
Mhm.
you kind of want to avoid, regular is best. And if you kind of know if you're in that perimenopausal stage, like when you should be getting your period or kind of around that time, it's so good for gynecological health.
Mhm.
Um, and another thing it's great for, and which becomes more common later in life, especially for women, is insomnia and just sort of sleep pattern related issues. So
Mhm.
it can really help regulate with that, which again is going to help with everything else because it's one of those four pillars is just rest.
Right.
So for a more preventative, regular maintenance approach, monthly, bi-monthly, or seasonally.
Yeah.
If it's more of a sport related thing, uh, as needed or preventatively. And if you are going to go for, here's two tips. if you're going to get acupuncture, make sure they're a registered acupuncturist with a governing body of whatever province or state or wherever you are in.
Yeah.
And if you do want to have more of that sport medicine approach, if you're in the States, there's actually a designation called sport medicine acupuncture, which is a great program.
Yeah.
Here, I'm actually collaborating with my mentor to create a different style it's called integrative myofascial acupuncture. And we're hoping that in the future, it's going to be a designation. We're just a little bit behind, but nothing like it yet is offered in Canada. And it is more of this sort of manual muscle therapy, acupuncture, movement assessments, exercise prescription in conjunction with Chinese medicine to treat not just athletes, but just active people, everyone.
Yeah.
So just making sure that the professional you're seeking, like any healthcare practitioner, has a bit of a background and experience in what you're seeking.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's really important because we have people that are listening from all over the world, and to know where to go, because it's obviously a manual treatment. So
yeah.
Wow, that you have given us a lot to think about. Like that was full on,
in a nutshell.
Full on 30 minutes right here. Okay, so we're going to do my rapid fire questions. They're going to be rapid. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. Give us one moment of courage.
Oh yeah. So for this one, I don't necessarily have a story, but I want to encourage courage, especially right now. There's a lot of things going on in the world. And I think if you're ever in a position where you can be an ally to someone and support someone who's being discriminated against in any way, I want you to have courage to help them. One of my favorite quotes is, there is no other human being that is less important than you, and there is no other human being who is more important than you. So if you're in public, if you hear someone say something that's discriminatory, just have the courage to be an ally, because we're all in this together.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Absolutely. Tell us one thing you're grateful for right now.
Collaborating with you, and if I can get one person out of this interaction to try acupuncture for the first time or get introduced to Chinese medicine, like that is a goal reached on my
awesome. Good. All right, you let us know, everybody, if you're listening to this. I want you to join the Athletes Thriving in Perimenopause and Beyond, and let us know that when you listen to Jacqueline and you tried acupuncture, and I want to know your experience. Okay, the challenge is out there. Let's get more people signed up for acupuncture, and if anything, you're gonna have a great night's sleep. I can attest and anecdotal evidence on all that. Actually, it's been a phenomenal aid to me in my health journey. So I am a strong believer. I just don't even, I have a hard time. I'm very sciencey, want to see lab results. Like that's how I go.
Yeah.
And so acupuncture is a real stretch for me. And like mentally, like there's like things flowing through my body and I just don't get it, but dang it works. So I do encourage you there. All right. One piece of advice that I know you're not in perimenopause and you're a bit younger. So what's one thing that you've learned that you are hoping to take with you, and you're going to keep telling yourself again and again and again, so you can be gentle or be whatever that you want to be? I shouldn't give you the prescription.
Oh my gosh. One thing to keep telling myself over and over again. I keep thinking of quotes that are just bubbling up in my brain.
Well, then give us a quote. It's totally perfect. Whatever comes to you.
People will never remember what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel. And that's something that's near and dear to my heart, especially if someone who talks all the time. That's who I am. Listen, let them know you're heard. I think Jim Carrey has a quote too, where he says the most important currency there is how you make someone feel. So, and I think you just get better and better as you age.
I think that is beautiful. What a wonderful way to end talk about an interview. But because that's so true, is how are we in this discussion together? How are we lifting each other up? How are we being in health and for health, then we can perform. So I really appreciate that. Okay. So where can people find you? If they if they're here local, then they can find you. And, is there a resource of acupuncture that you would want us to point to that we might learn more?
Oh yeah. You know what? So for maybe even the webinar might be accessible, but Peter Dedman Peter Deadman, Deadman, is on YouTube, and he has wonderful online free videos for Qigong, Tai Chi, dietary recommendations for menopause, and this Yangsheng Yangsheng literally means to nurture life. So if people want to learn more about these more yin nourishing practices, you can go on his YouTube and learn that. And where to find me, JacquelineSemple.com is my website.
Yeah.
And then I have my Instagram as well, which is Jacqueline_TCM. And I'm in downtown Victoria.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and your energy.
Thank you so much. This is so cool.
Your passion for acupuncture, Chinese medicine, getting athletes going, supporting women in perimenopause and beyond. We love it. And until next time.
Bye.
Bye.